The Dualsense Edge has been out for about a week now, and so far we've seen nothing but tech reviewers and gamers alike praising this controller like it's the second coming of the Messiah. So for this video, I am not going to be echoing those same praises. I'm actually going to give you an unbiased look at what it's like to actually own and play the Dualsense Edge, and yes, that will include some of the negatives. Starting out, I did pay $200 for this controller, and it took about 2 days to ship to my house. Diving into the hardware functionality, the grips on the Edge feel amazing. This does include the handles, joysticks, and the triggers. With all that being said, somehow this controller is still slippery and wants to pop right out of my hands while I'm gaming. In my opinion, the Dualsense Edge would have greatly benefited from having the grip that's on the back actually wrap around the entire handle to the front. This would have solved the problem with ease, and we've seen this displayed perfectly before on controllers like the Xbox Elite 2. As far as build quality, the Dualsense Edge feels like it was built with high quality materials. It makes it feel very premium and solid in your hands. This, however, comes at a cost because it leaves the Dualsense Edge feeling heavy and off balance. We see this in high-end headphones where sometimes they'll use a high quality plastic rather than a metal because of the fatigue and heaviness that it creates. I know the awkward off balance feel is largely in part due to the brand new cable locking mechanism, which suspends the USB-C cable several inches away from the Dualsense Edge. And while it was a great thought, it leaves the controller feeling anchored down and top heavy, which frankly is really uncomfortable while you're gaming. The good news is, since the cable locking mechanism is removable, players can simply choose not to use it. However, this still doesn't do enough in my eyes to alleviate the heft of the Dualsense Edge. In my opinion, I think Sony would have benefited from giving players a choice, kind of like how Scuf did with the Reflex line. You can either pick an FPS style controller that's going to come with clicky triggers and removed rumbles, or you can go with the RPG style controller that's going to obviously have the rumbles included, and then you want those haptic feedbacks inside the trigger. Moving right along, it's well known that I'm a huge fan of trigger stops on controllers. To this point, the Dualsense Edge is one of the first PS5 controllers that feature these. Other Pro controllers offered by Scuf or Battle Beaver, for example, have offered regular triggers or a mouse click variation. On the surface, the overall feel, texture, and design of these triggers are excellent. However, upon closer inspection, I started to notice that when I pressed them down firmly, there was a slight sway to them, and ultimately it kind of left them feeling like thin plastic. I also think there was way too much depth in the lowest travel path setting. For FPS gamers specifically, this could make it feel a little bit mushy. I absolutely love the Dualsense Edge removable back paddles. The metallic feel of the paddles and buttons themselves is excellent. However, the fact that there's only 2 buttons or paddles could be a huge problem for a lot of gamers. When I really dig deep and look at these paddles from an objective standpoint, I notice that the paddles themselves have too much give, and this leaves them feeling mushy rather than clicky and responsive. When I swap them out for the half buttons, I notice those are great. They feel very clicky, very responsive, and very tight-knit to the controller. Design-wise, I think Sony hit a home run with the Dualsense Edge. I love the black and white color scheme, and my favorite part is the little symbols of branding you can see featured on the grips, touchpad, and on the rear triggers. The hot swappable thumbsticks make this controller a gamer's dream. Gone are the days we have to worry about replacing an entire controller due to that inevitable stick drift. The joysticks themselves can be swapped out, and the Dualsense Edge includes lengthened and normal height joysticks. My favorite are the heavily textured dome variation. These feel amazing, and I can't imagine using anything else in the future. One major drawback I noticed about the Dualsense Edge is it features a significantly smaller battery than the original Dualsense controller. For a visual reference, I've opened up my standard Dualsense controller next to the Dualsense Edge, that way you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. I realize the design choice is most likely because Sony anticipates their players are going to be playing plugged in, which is indicated by the cable locking mechanism that they've included in the packaging. However, from experience, I think this controller lends itself more towards RPG gamers and not FPS players, and as far as I know, FPS players are the ones who mainly want to play plugged in. Me personally, when I play RPG games, I like to sit back, chill on the couch, and play wirelessly, and in contrast, when I play FPS games like Warzone, I like to be plugged in a gaming chair close to my monitor. When I consider the build quality, features, and price, I think this controller is a spectacular value. I love the fact that players don't have to worry as much about stick drift because you can replace the joystick modules. Longevity wise, I can see this controller holding up for a very long time, especially in comparison to the Scuff controller or the Battle Beaver, which are notorious for breaking down quickly. To me, it seems like the DualSense Edge is lacking identity. It doesn't really know who it wants to be. It's very difficult to build a controller that works for absolutely every type of gamer, which is why I would have loved to see at minimum 2 different variations of the same DualSense Edge controller. This way gamers can choose which one suits their playstyle the best.